Here's a question that sounds simple until you actually sit with it. You have hundreds of games, maybe over thousands, more than you could ever realistically finish, more than most people will play in a lifetime. So should you stop buying? And before you answer, notice what just happened in your head, because for most people, that question doesn't land neutrally. It lands somewhere between discomfort and defensiveness, like something that should have been asked out loud, like it's pointing at something you rather not look at directly. That direction is interesting, and it's worth paying attention to, because the honest answer isn't as obvious as it first appears, and depends on which side of this you land on. The reasoning runs deeper than you might expect. So let's actually look at it, both sides, all the way through. Let's go. Welcome to TalePlay. I'm Vasharal. This channel is the honest human side of gaming, but most importantly, the backlog. The conversations that normally people don't have, the ones that sit a little bit closer to the truth that most gaming content aren't willing to go through. Today's video is one of those conversations. Should you stop purchasing games when you already have enough? Now, I want to be clear about what the video is and what isn't. This isn't a productivity argument dressed up as a philosophy, and this is not a video that ends without making you think about your own habits in a way that's uncomfortable. What this is a genuine look at both sides of the question that a lot of backlog players are quietly carrying. The case for stopping is real, and it's compelling. The case for continuing is also real and also compelling, and both of them are worth hearing fully before you decide where you stand. I've thought about this question a lot. It touched my own library directly. Nearly 3,000 games, hundreds unplayed, more being added, and I've sat on both sides of this argument at different points, which is exactly why I think it's worth having out loud. So, we're going to move through this carefully. The case for stopping first, fully and honestly, not as a straw man. Then the case for continuing, with the same respect. And then I'll tell you where I land. So, let's begin. The case for stopping. Let's start here, and let's take it serious. The argument for stopping purchases when you already have enough is not a minimalist lecture. It's not about owning less for the sake of owning less. It's growth in something much more specific. The idea that at a certain point, adding more of your library stops serving you and starts working against you. The evidence for that, both psychological and personal, is harder to discuss than most people want to admit. The first argument is about attention. Every game you add to your library is a small claim on your mental bandwidth. Not just when you're playing, but also when you're not playing. The unplayed game sits there. It registers. It contributes to the low-level awareness that there's always more you haven't gotten into. Research on what psychologists call attention residue suggests that the awareness of the incomplete tasks doesn't stay neatly filled away. It bleeds into present. It creates a background hum of unfinished business that quietly affects how present you can be in whatever you are actually doing. A library of 50 games you haven't played creates that hum. A library of 500 games creates it even louder. And the question worth asking is whether the excitement of each new attention is worth the cumulative weight of everything it joins. The second argument is about satisfaction, and this one is backed up by research that's been studied for decades. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. The idea is straightforward and somewhat uncomfortable. Human beings are remarkably efficient at returning to the baseline level of satisfaction regardless of what changes in their life. A new game produces a spike of excitement at purchase. That spike fades. The game joins the library, the baseline returns, and the next purchase has to work a little harder to produce the same feeling as the one before. This is why the person with 3,000 games still feels the pull towards the next sale. It's not because they haven't found the right game yet. It's because the purchase itself has become the source of the feeling, not the playing. The acquisition loop is feeding something that playing doesn't fully satisfy anymore. And the question that raises is a sharp one. If buying has replaced playing as the primary source of gaming excitement, what exactly is the library for? The third argument is about choice. Barry Schwartz spent years researching what happens to human decision-making and satisfaction when the number of available options increases beyond a certain point. And what he found consistently was that more choices does not produce more happiness. It produces more anxiety, more second-guessing, and paradoxically, less satisfaction with whatever you ultimately choose. Because of the awareness of everything you didn't pick lingers in a way it doesn't when the options were limited. Apply that to gaming library and it maps uncomfortably well. The players with 400 games doesn't feel 400 times more free than the player with 10. They often feel less free, more paralyzed at the library screen, more likely to spend 20 minutes choosing and then starting something familiar, more likely to close the library without playing anything at all. The fourth argument is the most personal one. At some point, continuing to purchase becomes a way of maintaining a relationship with gaming without actually having to show up for it. The purchase feels like a participation. The growth library feels like evidence of being a serious player, but the actual engagement, the sitting down, the commitment, the finishing, that's happening less and less. And if that's true, the question isn't really about whether you have enough games. It's about whether adding more is a substitute for something you're doing. The case for stopping isn't about deprivation. It's about possibility that the library you already have, fully engaged with, and honestly explored might give you more than any new addition ever could. The case for continuing. Now let's go the other way around. Let's give this side the same respect, because the argument for continuing to purchase games even when you already have more than you could ever realistically finish is not just defensible. In several important ways, it's generally reasonable, and the person who makes it aren't in denial or being irrational. They're responding to something real about how this hobby actually works. The first argument is about possibility. There's the concept in psychology around what research calls open value. The idea that having access to something, even if you never used it, carries genuine psychological worth. The knowledge that the option exists changes how you feel about your situation. It creates a sense of abundance, of readiness, of having what you need before you need it. A large library functions this way. The game you bought 2 years ago and haven't touch isn't dead weight. It's a standing invitation. It's there for the version of you that exists 6 months from now on, in a different season, with different mood, who might need exactly that experience and have it immediately available. The second argument is about the nature of gaming as a living hobby. Gaming is not a static medium. It moves, it evolves, new mechanics emerge, new studios take risks that others won't, new narratives get told in ways that weren't possible a few years ago, and staying connected to that movement, being someone who participates in the conversation as it happens rather than always arriving years later, is a meaningful part of what it means to take this hobby seriously. Stopping purchases doesn't just freeze your library, it slowly disconnects you from the medium itself, from the discourse, from the shared experience of playing something at the same time as the rest of the community, from the feeling of being present in the hobby rather than perpetually catching up to it. The third argument is about economics and how games are sold. Games are perishable in ways that most other media aren't. Licenses expire, online services shut down, DLCs get delisted, sales happen once and don't come back. The game that costs $4 today will cost $40 next year, or it won't exist at all. The practical argument for buying games when the price and availability are right, even if you won't play them immediately, is not irrational consumption. It's an extremely sensible response to a market that genuinely works that way. The fourth argument pushes back directly on hedonic adaptation. Yes, the excitement of new purchases fades. Yes, the baseline returns. But the argument that this makes purchase meaningless proves too much. The same hedonic adaptation applies to almost everything that produces positive emotion. A great meal, a holiday, a conversation with someone you love. The fact that the feeling doesn't last forever doesn't mean the feeling wasn't real or it wasn't worth having. The fifth argument is perhaps the most honest one. Telling someone with a large backlog that they should stop purchasing assumes that the purpose of the game library is completion, that games are items on a list to be processed and retired. But that's not what the library is. A library is a reflection of taste, curiosity, and history. It is a record of what interests you, what you valued, what you wanted to have access to. The books on a shelf that you haven't read aren't failure. They're part of a texture of life that has more interest than ours. A game library works the same way. The player who continues to purchase intentionally, not compulsorily, not to fill a void, but because they genuinely love the medium and want to stay connected to it, is not doing something that needs to be corrected. They're just someone who takes their hobbies seriously. Where both sides meet. Here's what's interesting about this conversation. Both sides are right. Not particularly right. Not right about something and wrong about the others. Generally, fully right about different things, and the reason why this question is hard to answer cleanly is that the two arguments aren't actually in conflict with each other. They're answering different questions. The case for stopping is about psychology, about the internal experience of owning more than you can engage with, about what happens to enjoyment, attention, and satisfaction when a library grows past the point of genuine relationship with what's inside it. The case for continuing is about identity, about what it means to participate in a living medium, about the legitimate value of possibility, of options, of being someone who loves this hobby enough to stay connected to it even when the math of completion doesn't add up. The reason why these two arguments talk past each other is that they are operating in completely different registers. One is asking what's good for your peace of mind. The other is asking what's true about your relationship with gaming as a hobby and a medium. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because underneath both arguments, there's a third question that neither side names directly, and it's the one that actually matters. Why are you buying? Not whether you should, not how much is too much, but what exactly drives the purchase in the specific moment it happens. There are players who buy games the way a reader buys books, deliberately, with genuine curiosity about the specific thing they're acquiring, with a real, if indefinite, intention to engage with it. For those players, the library is exactly what it looks like, a curated collection of things they value, accumulated over time, waiting for the right moment. The case for continuing applies here almost entirely. And then there are players who buy games the way some people shop when they're stressed or bored or looking for a feeling that became harder to find inside actually play. The purchase is the point. The library is growing not because of genuine curation, but because acquisition has quietly replaced engagement as the primary way of relating to the hobby. For those players, the case for stopping applies with real force. The most players, if they're being truly honest, exist somewhere in the spectrum between those two, not purely one or the other. Sometimes buying with genuine intention, sometimes buying to fill up a gap, sometimes unable to tell the difference in the moment. This is where research on motivated reasoning becomes quietly relevant. Human beings are remarkably good at constructing justification for behaviors they were already going to engage in. The reason we give for purchase, it's on sale. I've been meaning to get it. The price won't come back, are often assembled after the decision has already been made emotionally. The logic follows the impulse rather than leading it, which means the question can only be answered by individual players in this specific moment with enough self-awareness to notice what's actually happening. So where does that leave you? I told you that at the start of this video that I wasn't going to give you a clean answer. And I mean it. Not because I don't have thoughts on it, not because I'm trying to avoid the discomfort of taking a position, but because I genuinely believe that a clean answer here would be a dishonest one. And this channel has never been about giving you the comfortable version of a conversation when the honest version is available. Here's what I can tell you. I have nearly 3,000 games in my library. I have games I bought back in 2011 that I haven't even opened. I have a high priority titles that I have been sitting on at the top of my list for years while other things got added around them. I know what the attentional weight of an overlarge library feels like because I carry it. I know what the excitement of a sale feels like. I know what it feels like to add something with genuine intention, and I know what it feels like to add something because the price was right and I told myself I'll get to it eventually. eventually. And I've been honest enough with myself to know that both of these things have happened, sometimes in the same session. What I've landed on, not as a rule, not as a prescription, but a personal orientation, is this. The library I have is extraordinary. The experience waiting inside is as real as they are enough. More than enough. And every time I add something new, the most honest question I can ask myself isn't whether I can afford it or whether it's a good deal. It's whether I'm adding it because I genuinely want that specific experience, or whether I'm adding it because adding feels like participating, and participating feels better than the alternative, which is sitting with the library I already have and deciding to actually show up for it. That question doesn't always produce the same answer. Sometimes the purchase is exactly right, sometimes it isn't. But asking it without letting the rationalization arrive first changes the nature of your decision. The question this video asks, should you stop purchasing games when you have enough, is really asking something deeper than it appears. It's asking what enough means to you. Whether enough is a number or a feeling, whether it's about the size of your library or the quality of your relationship with what's inside it. Whether gaming is something you practice or something you collect. Those are questions only you can answer, and they're worth answering honestly. Because the library you already have, the one sitting there right now, full of things you bought with real excitement and real intentions, deserves more than to keep being buried under the next thing. It deserves to be played. Where did you land on this? Are you going to stop buying? Or are you gonna keep buying? Or the honest answer sits somewhere more complicated than either of those? Drop it below and be honest with yourself about why. That's the whole point of this one. If this video makes you think, hit that like button. It helps more people find TalePlay and find conversation like this one. As well, if you wanna stay in touch, feel free to hit subscribe and ring that bell notification so that you'll be notified every time I post my next video. It might be a while until I will create more videos, as I have a very busy schedule, and if you check my posts you probably know that I'm experimenting right now with DaVinci Resolve, so it's gonna take a while until I adjust. A few things will change, but the channel will be going, and I'm suspecting that in the near future, when things get much more reasonable when it comes to time, having a little bit more time and not being so busy with a little one, and obviously my time being shifted now, working in afternoons, I'm suspecting that eventually things will get back to normal and I'll be able to create more content. But until next time, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for watching, supporting, and waiting patiently for my next video. I'm Vashal, and as always, God bless, have fun, and happy gaming.
Starts the hunter and the dreamer say together.